The History and Evolution of United States Postage Stamps, 1847 to 1922, Kitop. Chapter 1. The Birth of the Adhesive Revolution, 1847. Introduction. Before 1847, sending a letter in the United States was a mess. There were no stamps. You didn't pay when you sent the mail. The person receiving it had to pay. If they didn't have the money, the postman took the letter back. Imagine the chaos. But on July 1st, 1847, everything changed. The US government released its first two official postage stamps, the 5-cent Benjamin Franklin and the 10-cent George Washington. The paper, thick, fragile, and handmade. Unlike the smooth, synthetic paper we use today, the first US stamps were printed on thin, bluish or grayish handmade paper. Manufacturing. It wasn't mass-produced by giant machines. It was rag paper, often made from cotton or linen fibers. Texture. If you touched one back then, it felt slightly rough and uneven. The look. Because the paper was handmade, the thickness varied. Some stamps were translucent, while others felt like heavy parchment. This inconsistency is exactly what makes them a nightmare and a treasure for collectors today. The printing, the intaglio method. These weren't just printed, they were engraved. A company called Rawdon, Wright, Hatch and Edson used a process called intaglio. A master engraver would carve the image into a steel plate by hand. Ink was rolled over the plate, wiped off the surface, but left inside the deep grooves. When the paper was pressed onto it with immense pressure, it literally sucked the ink out, creating a raised 3D texture that you could feel with your fingernail. The sticking point, the mystery of the glue. Now, let's talk about the most annoying part of 1847 stamps, the gum, glue. Back then, it wasn't a peel and stick world. The glue was made from natural starches, dextrin, or animal-based products. Application. It was applied by hand using brushes. The struggle. The glue was often yellowish or brownish. It was notoriously unreliable. In humid weather, the stamps would stick together in the postmaster's drawer. In dry weather, the glue would crack, and the stamp would fall right off the envelope. The taste. There were no flavors back then. Licking a 1847 stamp probably tasted like bitter, old crackers mixed with a hint of chemicals. The no perforation nightmare. Here is the craziest part. These stamps had no holes, perforations. If you went to the post office to buy a stamp, the clerk didn't tear it off a sheet. They had to use scissors to cut your stamp out of a large sheet of 100. If the clerk was in a hurry or had shaky hands, they would accidentally cut into the design. This is why finding a 1847 stamp with 4 clear margins is like finding a needle in a haystack today. Conclusion. The 1847 stamps were primitive, messy, and difficult to use, but they were a technological marvel of their time. They turned communication from a luxury into a public right. In the next chapter, we will look at how the gold rush and the 1850s forced the government to make these stamps faster, cheaper, and much stickier. Key points for your video/podcast. Tone. Use a storytelling voice. Emphasize the struggle of the old days. Visuals. If you are making a video, show close-ups of the intaglio texture. Chapter 2. The Perforation Revolution and the 1851 Crisis. Introduction. Welcome back. By 1851, the United States was expanding rapidly. The California gold rush was in full swing, and people were moving west. The old 1847 stamps, which cost 5 and 10 cents, were becoming too expensive for the common man. The public demanded cheaper mail. So the government slashed the price of a standard letter to 3 cents. This led to the birth of the most famous classic stamp in US history, the 3-cent George Washington, 1851 issue. The paper searching for quality. As the volume of mail exploded, the old handmade rag paper was no longer enough. The shift printers started moving toward more consistent, machine-made paper. The problem? This new paper was thinner and more brittle. While it made printing easier, it made handling the stamps harder. They would tear easily if you weren't careful. Collectors today look for the silk threads or plate varieties in this paper to prove its authenticity. The Perforation Revolution, 1857. For the first 10 years of US stamps, as we discussed in Chapter 1, you had to use scissors to cut every single stamp. It was slow, frustrating, and messy, but in 1857, everything changed with a machine. The invention, the US Post Office finally adopted perforations, those little holes between stamps. The change. Now you could just tear a stamp off the sheet. It felt like magic to the people of 1857. The technicality. The first perforation machines were primitive. Sometimes the holes were too close to the design, ruining the look of the stamp. These early perfs are now highly valuable because they show the evolution of the technology. The stuck situation, better gum. With more people sending mail, the glue had to improve. No one wanted their letters getting lost because the stamp fell off in a dusty mail coach. The formula. They moved away from thick animal glues to a cleaner, thinner, vegetable-based gum. The result? It was less likely to crack the paper, but it was still sweetless. It still didn't taste good, but at least it stayed on the envelope during a long trip across the country, on a horse or a train. The design wars. Because the 1851-1857 stamps were printed in such massive quantities, the steel plates started to wear down. This created thousands of plate varieties, tiny lines or dots that weren't supposed to be there. For a boring history lover, this is where it gets exciting, because a tiny extra line on a 3-cent stamp can turn a $5 stamp into a $5,000 treasure. Conclusion. By the end of the 1850s, the US postal system was modernizing. We had cheaper rates, machine-made paper, and the convenience of perforations. But just as things were getting organized, the country was about to split apart. In the next chapter, we will see how the Civil War changed the history of stamps forever. When stamps became more than just postage, they became a tool of war. Chapter 3. The Civil War. Stamps as Symbols of Division, 1861 to 1865. Introduction. The year is 1861. The United States is tearing itself apart. The Confederate States of America have seceded, and the Civil War has begun. This wasn't just a war fought on battlefields, it was also fought in post offices, on envelopes, and with postage stamps. Suddenly, stamps were no longer just for sending letters. They became powerful symbols of allegiance, a way to declare whose side are you on. The federal response, the 1861 issues. When the southern states left the Union, a major problem arose. What about all the US stamps already in circulation in the South? The US government feared that the Confederacy would simply use these existing stamps to fund their war effort. The solution: the Union declared all existing 1851 to 1860 stamps invalid. They quickly issued an entirely new series of stamps in 1861. This forced everyone, North and South, to buy new stamps. The design: these new Union stamps featured new portraits and designs, including Abraham Lincoln on the 10-cent stamp. They were printed on a slightly thicker, whiter paper, and the perforations were much more consistent. The colors: Brighter, more distinct colors were used to make them harder to counterfeit. The most common was the 3-cent rose, featuring Washington, which became synonymous with the Union postal system. The Confederate counterattack provisional stamps. The Confederacy was in a bind. They needed a postal system, but they had no stamps and no means to print them initially. Local solutions. Postmasters in southern towns became instant stamp producers. They created provisional stamps. These were often crudely hand-stamped or printed locally on whatever paper was available. Some were just handwritten notes saying "paid" with a local postmaster's signature. Ingenuity. Imagine a small-town postmaster in the middle of a war trying to keep communication alive for soldiers and families. They used anything from old newspaper scraps to wallpaper. These provisional stamps are incredibly rare and tell a powerful story of resilience and desperation. The first Confederate stamps. Eventually, the Confederate government managed to issue its own official stamps, starting in 1861 with portraits of Jefferson Davis and other Confederate heroes. These stamps had their own distinct designs and colors. The paper and gum during wartime. War meant scarcity, paper quality. Both sides struggled to get good paper. The Union had better access to northern mills, but even they faced challenges. Confederate stamps were often printed on very thin, almost translucent paper, sometimes with imperfections. The gums struggle. The quality of the adhesive also suffered. Resources were diverted to the war effort, and reliable gum was not a priority. Stamps often arrived unstuck or required extra licking, which nobody enjoyed. Blockades and mail. The Union blockade severely impacted mail delivery to and from the Confederacy. Smuggling. Letters were often smuggled across enemy lines. Censorship. Both sides heavily censored mail to prevent intelligence leaks. Soldiers' letters were frequently opened and read. The impact. This made the act of sending and receiving a letter a perilous but deeply personal connection during a time of immense uncertainty. A stamp on an envelope from this era often carried with it a story of danger and hope. Conclusion. The Civil War transformed US postage stamps. They went from simple utilities to symbols of national identity, tools of government control, and poignant reminders of a nation divided. The era produced some of the most historically significant and sought-after stamps in Philately. In our next chapter, we'll see how the end of the war and the beginning of Reconstruction brought new changes and new challenges to the US postal system. 4. The Pictorial Revolution and the 1869 Controversy. Introduction. After the Civil War, the United States was a wounded nation trying to heal. In 1869, the Post Office Department decided to do something radical. For over 20 years, stamps had only featured the faces of dead presidents or Benjamin Franklin. They were formal and, frankly, a bit boring. But in 1869, they released a series of stamps that looked like tiny pieces of art. This was the pictorial issue. The first timestamps told a story through pictures. The design, breaking the tradition. Instead of just heads of famous men, these new stamps featured scenes of American progress and history. The 2 cent, a post horse and rider, representing the early mail days. The 3 cent, a locomotive, representing the future and the Industrial Revolution. The 12 cent, an ocean steamship, symbolizing global connection. The 15 cent, the landing of Columbus. The 24 cent, the Declaration of Independence. These were the first square-shaped stamps, moving away from the traditional tall rectangles. They were vibrant, detailed, and completely different. The printing, 2 colors for the first time. This chapter in history inverts. Imagine a stamp where the shield is right side up, but the horse or the flags are upside down. Today, these mistakes are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The public backlash: too small, too weird. You would think people would love these beautiful stamps, right? Wrong. The public hated them. The size. People complained they were too small and hard to handle. The glue, the gum on the back was still a problem, often being too thick or uneven. The disrespect. Many felt that replacing the faces of Washington and Lincoln with pictures of trains and horses was disrespectful to the nation's founders. The backlash was so fast and so loud that these stamps were only in production for 1 year. By 1870 they were discontinued, making them some of the rarest and most collectible stamps in US history today. Technical detail. Great experiment. During this era, the government was terrified of people cloning the cancellation ink off stamps to reuse them. To stop this, they used a technique called grill. They pressed the pattern of tiny pyramids into the paper, creating small single files. When the cancellation ink hit the stamp, it would soak deep into these broken fibers, making it impossible to wash off. If you look at an 1869 stamp today, you might see a faint waffle-like pattern on the back. That's the grill. Conclusion: the 1869 pictorials were a beautiful failure. They pushed the limits of printing technology and art, but they were ahead of their time. The public wasn't ready for pictures on their mail. In the next chapter, we'll see how the post office went back to the basics with the large banknote issues, where stamps became more industrial, more uniform, and much more businesslike. Chapter 4 complete. Chapter 5. The Banknote Era, 1870 to 1890. Introduction. After the beautiful failure of the 1869 pictorial stamps, the US Post Office decided to go back to basics. They wanted stamps that looked professional, authoritative, and hard to forge. This gave birth to the banknote era, a 20-year period where 3 different private printing companies competed to produce America's postage. This era is a goldmine for boring history lovers, because it's all about tiny details, secret marks, and industrial competition. The 3 giants. Unlike today, the government didn't print its own stamps. They hired private banknote companies. 1. National Bank Note Company, 1870 to 1873. They created the original designs, often called large banknotes because of their size. 2. Continental Bank Note Company, 1873 to 1879. When they won the contract, they took the same plates from National but added something sneaky: secret marks. 3. American Bank Note Company, 1879 to 1894. They eventually swallowed the other 2 companies and took over production, moving towards small banknotes. The paper, soft versus hard. The paper became a major way to identify these stamps. Hard paper. In the beginning, stamps were printed on hard paper that was crisp and white. If you dropped it on a table, it would almost ring, like a bell. Soft, porous paper. Later, the American Banknote Company switched to a softer, more absorbent paper. This was done so the ink would soak in better, making it impossible for people to wash off the cancellation marks and reuse the stamps. The mystery of the secret marks. This is the most famous part of this chapter. When the Continental Bank Note Company took over the plates from the National Company in 1873, they wanted to make sure they could tell their stamps apart from the old ones. They added tiny, almost invisible lines or dots to the designs. For example, on the 2-cent Jackson stamp, they added a tiny ball or crescent shape in the scrollwork. On the 3-cent Washington, they added a small shaded area under the ribbon. To the naked eye, they look identical, but to a collector with a magnifying glass, these marks are the difference between a common stamp and a rare treasure. The glue, improving the bond. During this period, the adhesive finally started to get better. The companies began using a refined gum that was less likely to crack or turn brown. However, they still faced a major problem: tropical gum. Stamps sent to the hot, humid South often stuck together, so they had to experiment with different chemical mixes to keep the stamps dry and usable. The industrial grill fades away. In the early part of this era, they still tried using the grill, those tiny waffle-like indentations, to prevent fraud. But as printing technology improved and the new porous paper was introduced, the grill became too expensive and slow to produce. By the mid-1870s, the grill was officially retired, marking the end of one of the weirdest experiments in stamp history. Conclusion: the banknote era was about consistency and security. The US was growing into an industrial superpower, and its stamps finally looked the part. But while these stamps were professional, they were still just portraits. The public was starting to crave something more grand. In the next chapter, we'll move into the 1890s, where America celebrated its history with the most beautiful and largest stamps ever made, the Columbians. Chapter 5 complete. Chapter 6. The Columbian Issue. America's First Commemoratives, 1893. Introduction. The year is 1893. America is ready to show off. The World's Columbian Exposition is opening in Chicago to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus landing in the Americas. To mark this event, the post office did something they had never done before. They issued the first commemorative stamps. These weren't meant to last forever. They were a special, limited edition to celebrate history. The design, the jumbo stamps. If you saw a Columbian stamp in 1893, the first thing you would notice is the size, the scale. They were nearly double the size of regular stamps. They were wide, cinematic, and looked like tiny oil paintings. The series. There were 16 stamps in total, ranging from 1 cent all the way up to an incredible $5 stamp. The artwork. Each stamp told a part of Columbus's story. From his sighting of land on the 1 cent stamp to Columbus in chains on the $2 stamp. The $5 stamp featured a portrait of Columbus himself. The paper, a premium feel. Because these were luxury stamps, the paper quality had to be top-notch. The texture, they used a high-quality cream-toned porous paper. It was thick and durable, designed to hold the heavy amounts of ink required for such detailed engravings. The challenge. Because the stamps were so large, the sheets were massive. This made them difficult for postmasters to store without them curling or sticking together in the heat. The printing. Masterpieces in ink. These stamps are considered some of the most beautiful ever printed. They were produced by the American Bank Note Company. The engraving was so fine that you could see the individual waves in the ocean, and the expressions on the faces of the sailors. The color palette. Each denomination had a unique, rich color: maroon, deep blue, violet black, and even a sage green. The controversy. A tax on collectors. Believe it or not, people were angry about these too. The cost. To buy a full set of Columbian stamps in 1893 would cost you $16.34. In today's money, that is over *500. The complaint. Most people only earned a few dollars a week. They felt the government was just trying to suck money out of stamp collectors. In fact, a resolution was even brought to the US Senate to stop the production of these unnecessary stamps. The irony. Today, A complete, unused set of these stamps is worth thousands of dollars. The people who complained missed out on a fortune. The glue, the large surface problem. Since the stamps were twice as big, they needed twice as much glue. The issue: the gum used was a high-grade vegetable dextrin, but because the stamps occupied more surface area on the envelope, they were prone to shrinking. As the glue dried, it would sometimes pull the paper, causing the large stamps to curve or even crack. Collectors today look for flat Columbians because they are so much harder to find. Conclusion: the 1893 Columbians changed everything. They proved that stamps could be more than just tax receipts for mail. They could be souvenirs, art, and historical records. They sparked a massive boom in stamp collecting across America. But as the 19th century began to close, the government decided it was time to stop hiring private companies and take control of the printing themselves. Chapter 6 complete. Yeah. Chapter 7. The Bureau takes control. 1894 to 1900. Introduction. For nearly 50 years, the United States government had relied on private banknote companies to print its stamps. But in 1894, a massive shift occurred. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing, BEP, in Washington, D.C., which was already printing the nation's paper money, took over the production of postage stamps. This wasn't just a change in management. It was the birth of a government monopoly that would last for over a century. The printing, the triangle's secret. When the Bureau took over the plates from the private companies, they didn't want to change the designs entirely. They used the same portraits of Washington, Franklin, and Lincoln. However, they needed a way to show that these were Bureau stamps. The triangle mark. If you look at the top corners of these 1894 stamps, you will see tiny triangles carved into the design. The varieties. There are 3 types of these triangles: type 1, 2, and 3. To a regular person, they look identical. To a boring history expert, these tiny lines represent the Bureau's first independent artistic mark on American mail. The paper, a massive quality issue. Transitioning from a private company to a government bureau wasn't smooth. The BEP struggled with the paper quality in the beginning. Watermarks, 1895. To prevent counterfeiting, the Bureau introduced watermarked paper. They pressed the letters USPS, United States Postal Service, into the wet paper pulp. The discovery. You can't see the watermark just by looking at the stamp. You have to dip it in a special fluid or hold it against a strong light. This was a high-tech security feature for the 1890s. The texture. The paper was often thinner than the old banknote paper, making these stamps feel more modern but also more fragile. The glue, the gooey mess. The Bureau's early attempts at gum, glue, were almost a disaster. The quality. The initial glue was thick, yellowish, and had a tendency to soak through the paper, staining the front of the stamp. Climate problems. In the summer of 1894, the glue was so sensitive to humidity that thousands of sheets of stamps stuck together in post offices across the country. The Bureau had to quickly change the chemical formula to a harder gum that could survive the American heat. The 1898 Trans-Mississippi issue. Just as they were perfecting their technique, the Bureau produced what many consider the king of stamps, the 1898 Trans-Mississippi issue. The design. Much like the Columbians, these were large, beautiful scenes of the American West, buffaloes, pioneers, and the Mississippi River. The Black Bull. The $1 stamp from this series, featuring cattle in a storm, known as the Western Cattle in Storm, is often called the most beautiful stamp ever issued by the United States. Technical mastery, the transition to 1900. By the end of the century, the Bureau had mastered the art. The colors became more consistent, the perforations were cleaner using a standard 12-gauge punch, and the printing was faster. They had turned stamp making into a high-speed industrial process. Conclusion: the 1890s ended with the Bureau of Engraving and Printing firmly in control. They had survived a rough start, fought off counterfeiters with watermarks, and created masterpieces of Western art. The 19th century was closing, and a new era of technology, airplanes, and world wars was about to change the face of the mail forever. Chapter 8: The Pan-American Exposition and the Dawn of a New Century, 1901. Introduction. The year 1901 marked the beginning of a new century, and America was obsessed with transportation and speed. To celebrate the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York, the post office released a special set of 6 stamps. These weren't just stamps, they were a tribute to the machines that were shrinking the world. From steamships to the brand new automobile, these stamps captured a world in motion. The design, the modern marvels. For the first time since the failed experiment of 1869, the government decided to go back to bicolor printing. 2 colors on 1 stamp. Each stamp featured a black central image, the vignette, surrounded by a colorful frame. 1 cent. The Lake Steamer, green frame. 2 cent. The Empire State Express train, red frame, the fastest train of its time. 4 cent. The electric automobile, red-brown frame. Yes, electric cars were high-tech even in 1901. 10 cent. The American steamship, light brown frame. The invert disaster, or jackpot. Because these stamps were printed in 2 separate steps, the curse of 1869 returned. The famous inverts. Some sheets were fed into the press upside down, resulting in the fast train or the electric car appearing to be flying upside down inside their frames. The rarity, the 1 cent, 2 cent, and 4 cent inverts are legendary. Today, an upside-down 4-cent automobile stamp is one of the most prized possessions a collector can own. The paper, strength and security. By 1901, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing had perfected the use of double-line watermark paper. If you hold these stamps to the light, you can see large, ghostly letters U, S, P, or S stretched across the fibers. This paper was tough, slightly thicker than previous issues, and designed to withstand the high-speed sorting machines that were beginning to be used in major cities. The glue, the sweet success. Finally, the chemists at the Bureau got the formula right. They moved to a clear, high-gloss dextrin gum. Unlike the brown, gooey mess of the 1890s, this glue was smooth, resisted cracking, and didn't stain the paper. It was so effective that many 1901 stamps found today still have their original mint shine, looking as fresh as the day they were printed. The perforations, machine precision. The holes between the stamps were now being punched by massive, automated machines. The perforation 12 standard was now so precise that it was rare to find a miscut stamp. This industrial perfection meant that the boring consistency the government wanted was finally achieved. Conclusion: the 1901 Pan American stamps were a huge hit with the public. They were beautiful, modern, and exciting. But more importantly, they set the stage for the most famous and longest-running series in US history, the Washington Franklin issues, which we will explore in the next chapter. These would become the workhorses of the American mail for the next 20 years. Chapter 8 complete. Chapter 9. The Washington Franklin issues. The Great Stamp Hunt, 1908 to 1922. Introduction. Welcome to the Everest of stamp collecting. From 1908 to 1922, the US Post Office issued a series of stamps that looked almost identical, featuring only the portraits of George Washington and Benjamin Franklin. To a normal person, they all look the same. But to a boring history enthusiast, this era is a massive puzzle of paper types, perforations, and secret watermarks. This is the Washington-Franklin era. The design, ultimate simplicity. The government wanted to save money and create a unified look. The rule: Benjamin Franklin was placed on all 1-cent stamps. George Washington was placed on every other denomination from 2 cents to $5. The look: they used a simple olive wreath or laurel wreath design. It was clean, dignified, and extremely industrial. The mystery: how to tell them apart. This is where it gets boring and exciting. Because the designs didn't change for 14 years, the only way to know if a stamp is common or worth $10,000 is to look at the technical specs. 1. Perforations. The government kept changing the size of the holes. They went from perforation 12 to 10, then to 11. Even a half-millimeter difference changes everything. 2. Watermarks. They switched from double-line USPS watermarks to single-line watermarks and eventually to no watermark at all. 3. Printing methods. They experimented with flat plate printing, crisp and clear, and rotary press printing, where the image is slightly stretched. The paper: experiments in durability. During this time, the Bureau experimented with different paper mixtures to stop the stamps from shrinking or curling. Bluish paper, 1909. For a short time, they added 35% rag stock to the paper, which gave it a distinct bluish-gray tint. These are very rare today. China clay paper. Another experiment involved adding high amounts of clay to the paper pulp. The result: most of these experiments failed, but they created some of the rarest varieties in the history of the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. The coil stamps, the birth of vending machines. This era saw the rise of automation. People wanted to buy stamps from machines, or use them in large office affixing machines. Coil stamps. These were stamps produced in long rolls, with perforations only on 2 sides, either top-bottom or left-right. The rarity: because these were often used and thrown away by machines, high-quality coil stamps from this era are now prize pieces for collectors. The end of an era, World War I. As World War I broke out, the cost of ink rose. The government had to change the colors of the stamps, like the 3-cent stamp changing from violet to purple, to save money. This added even more varieties for collectors to hunt for. By 1922, the Post Office finally decided that 14 years of Washington and Franklin was enough, and they prepared for a new, more colorful series. Conclusion: the Washington-Franklin issues taught collectors that beauty isn't just in the picture, it's in the paper, the ink, and the tiny holes. It turned stamp collecting into a science. But as the Roaring Twenties approached, America was ready for stamps that showed more than just 2 faces. In the next chapter, we will see the birth of the 1922 regular issues, where the designs finally opened up to include monuments, landscapes, and heroes. Chapter 9 complete. Chapter 10. The 1922 series and beyond. The modern era begins. Introduction. By 1922, the United States was entering a period of immense change. World War I was over, and the public was tired of seeing the same 2 faces, Washington and Franklin, on every piece of mail. The Post Office Department decided it was time for a refresh. This led to the 1922 regular issue series, which set the standard for modern American stamp design and introduced a more diverse range of subjects. The design, from portraits to national icons. This series was a departure from the strict two-portrait rule of the previous 14 years. It aimed to showcase the beauty and history of the entire nation. National monuments. For the first time, landmarks like the Statue of Liberty, 15 cent, and the Lincoln Memorial, $1 stamp, were featured on postage. A broader history. While Washington and Franklin remained on common denominations, the series added other presidents like Garfield, McKinley, and even Theodore Roosevelt, 5 cent. The American bison, the 30-cent stamp, featured a majestic buffalo, a symbol of the American West that became an instant favorite among the public. Technical milestone, the rotary press revolution. The 1920s saw the dominance of the rotary press over the older flat plate printing method. The process. Unlike the flat plates that printed individual sheets, the rotary press used continuous rolls of paper. This was much faster and more efficient for a growing population. The rotary stretch. Because the paper was pulled around a cylindrical plate, the images on rotary press stamps are often slightly wider or taller, by about 0.5 mm to 1 mm, than their flat plate counterparts. For collectors, distinguishing between these two is the ultimate test of skill, the end of watermarked paper. As the demand for stamps exploded, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing had to find ways to cut costs and speed up production. Efficiency first. Watermarking every sheet of paper was a slow and expensive process. The transition, starting around 1916 and finalizing in the early 1920s, the USPS watermark was officially retired. From this point forward, most American stamps were printed on plain, unwatermarked paper, marking the end of a security era. The rise of airmail and the inverted jenny. No history of this era is complete without mentioning airmail. As planes became more reliable, the post office launched special airmail services. The colors airmail stamps were printed in vibrant, distinct colors to ensure postal workers could easily identify priority mail. The legend. This period gave us the inverted jenny of 1918, a 24-cent stamp where the Curtiss Jenny airplane was printed upside down. It remains the most famous and valuable printing era in the history of the world. Conclusion: the legacy of a century. The 1922 series was the bridge between the old world of 19th century engraving and the modern world of diverse, artistic postage. From the first crude stamps of 1847 to the high-speed, multi-subject issues of the 1920s, we have seen how a tiny piece of gummed paper can act as a mirror to a nation's soul. Stamps are no longer just receipts for delivery. They are tiny, indestructible archives of human achievement. Chapter 10 complete.